Big Mouth, the show that takes growing up as a kid and gives the idea of puberty being a time of fraught sexuality identity to a whole new level with physical representations of all its characters' hormone monsters.
And we need boundaries.
If you want me to go away, you know what you have to do.
It's a pretty bizarre adult animated comedy show, and one that I have not really massively interacted with before this point, as its humour didn't really seem to be the kind of thing that I would click with that well, and so I just kind of put it to the side. But now they've done the one thing that lures me back in to want to analyse and criticise and potentially compliment a trans character. Now, we already have a somewhat interesting setup initially here, which is that this is a trans character who is a child within the show, because most of the main characters are children. And so we get to see a bit of representation done from that side of things that doesn't often get to be on the screen. Now, obviously, the show is designed for children to watch it, so this is not a case of kids getting to see themselves represented on their TV, but that doesn't make it pointless. It's still good for even adults to get to see the existence of trans kids and learn a bit about their lives and how they are affected by puberty and by identity becoming a bigger deal during the process of growing up. Especially identity as it pertains to the sexual binary that most people believe is the only way things can be. Hint, it's not a sexual or gender binary, the whole thing is more of a spectrum in a slightly bimodal pattern. So Big Mouth has an opportunity here to do something that doesn't get done a lot. Show a trans kid dealing with trans issues in an episode that lets us see them literally deal with their puberty in the form of a hormone monster. Now, we have a good sign off the bat, which is that this will not be a single episode video. There are 3 episodes at the beginning of season 4 that contain our trans character, Natalie El-Khoury. She appears during the opening season arc at this kids camp called Camp Mahogany Sun, and the fact that she gets to be in more than one episode lends a lot of weight to the idea that this will be done somewhat well, if only because it lets us have more time on the screen and more opportunities to exist and to be expressed for the audience. So with that high level expectation already set up, let's get into it with the first episode of season 4, The New Me.
Okay, the first thing to tell you in this song.
So the episode begins with a quick musical recap of what happened last season, which we don't care about because it wasn't trans enough, or, well, trans at all, I guess. There are some questions about gender that just sort of naturally get brought up by the premise that the people in the show have run with, in regards to the children going through puberty and also dealing with the hormone monsters, but we want the definitive trans experience if it exists, and that's what we have been promised at this camp that everyone is going to.
Now after summer camp to start anew, I'd rather die.
It is also at this point that I remember the second reason that Big Mouth put me off from wanting to watch it in any capacity, and that's that the character design is sort of horrifyingly bad. The eyes don't look good, the bodies move weirdly, and it all feels rather cheaply put together without any real style or innovation at all. I just don't like it. And on the track of the level of comedy I don't like, they begin the camp with a bunch of stuff that effectively constitutes public indecency at best and sexual harassment at worst, all covered up with the visage of just a dude being silly and wacky, yo.
That's his nut.
I don't know, there might be such a thing as too much sex-based humour. At some point you kinda Icarus it and fly too close to the sun and burn yourself out so that it doesn't even feel adventurous or risque anymore. Let's speed through until we hit the trans character. That seems like the smartest plan for not having me burn out on this as quick as physically possible.
Can't wait, cheers to that. But first, I meant to introduce you to a new camper.
John Oliver comes into the boys' cabins, because this is camp and so the bed bunks are divided by gender, and tells them that a new camper called Natalie has joined, to which she tells him that she isn't new. We then very quickly learn why she would say that when our main character Nick calls her Gabe with a tone that suggests a little bit of confusion.
Hold on. Gabe? Natalie.
Hey guys.
You see, kids, gender.
John Oliver tries to give a very bad and awkward message on gender presentation and identity, while the kids all seem confused, and we get a quick look inside Natalie's mind about how she regrets this choice to come back to camp because of all the reasons that can exist for someone who has transitioned recently to be afraid and anxious and worried around those who knew them previously, and that they have no idea how they're going to react to it.
Oh God, coming here was a terrible mistake. Look at them, they hate you.
Which means that she is mostly thinking that they all hate her. Despite that, she puts on a brave face and tells them all that her name is Natalie now, that she is transgender, and that she uses she/her pronouns. All of which feels a little bit like we are ticking a box of how to introduce a trans character, but I will give kudos where kudos is due for being very upfront about the entire thing.
That I'm transgender. I use she, her pronouns.
No hiding here or playing it safe. We just say the exact words that tell us exactly what is going on and move along. The show uses this as a joke setup for John Oliver to then throw Natalie in the deep end and tell all the boys to ask any questions that they want of her in this moment. Something which is a little bit weird, to be honest, but John Oliver only ever really plays incompetent, socially inept characters on TV, so what more can you expect from his character?
To the beach in a rapping way. I got a real big penis and I drink lots of tea.
We learn from this open session that Natalie will be staying in the girls' cabin. Something which the dudes take as a sign that this whole thing is just a scam by Natalie to obtain access to the girls and watch them.
Staying in the girls' bunk.
Nice. So this is all scam.
Don't particularly like that attitude. Hope that shit gets fucking taken to task or proved wrong incredibly fast. And that's about all we really learn, to be honest, because the guys start immediately asking terrible and invasive questions that get Natalie instantly defensive and angry. Perfectly rightfully angry, because who the fuck would enjoy being part of the world's most bizarre interrogation, especially as a child? So as far as the introduction goes, not the best thing ever in universe, but I think out of universe we can understand that Natalie seems to be in the good person position here. We're getting placed on her side as an audience in regards to feeling like she was hard done by and that she is dealing with a lot of bullshit that she shouldn't have to deal with.
Please, just tell us if you have a dick.
Shut the fuck up, all of you. Eat my fucking asshole.
I mean, I'm sure there are some viewers who position themselves with the guys here, but I don't think that viewpoint is getting support from the creators, and you can't help bigoted idiots existing. Well, actually, you can help, but legally I can't go further on that detail. Now, as we move to a gap in the episode for trans stuff here, it jumping onto the other plot lines of it, this is a good opportunity for me to discuss something else that is of relevance for us. Who is voice acting Natalie? And the answer to that is Josie Tota, who you might know as a Disney Channel actor, as well as a main character for the revival of Saved by the Bell.
Thank you, Ron.
A speech is not necessary.
We will be collecting donations.
The main important thing for us here, though, is that Josie Tota is an openly trans woman who has been instrumental in playing trans characters since she came out in 2018, as well as being someone with Palestinian and Lebanese heritage, which is kind of important too, because Natalie is a POC Muslim trans character. And so having a POC Muslim person play her is helpful with regards to not having any vibes that align with what is effectively whitewashing or race bending. This is a complex conversation that goes deep into the idea of white dominance and cultural appropriation, and so it is oftentimes just a hell of a lot easier to go with casting people who are primed to play their characters because they share those identities with them. It's also helpful from a creative standpoint because you can then get the actor involved in the creative side. They can offer criticisms on dialogue or scenes based on their own personal experiences, and so the character can become a better reflection that actually clicks with the community that they are meant to be a part of, and so it becomes more meaningful and truthful. So yeah, this is another plus in Big Mouth's favour, that they went about hiring a trans actor to play their trans character, and hopefully we get to see how that choice impacts the quality of trans representation that we get within these episodes.
Hey guys, this is Natalie. She'll be in our bunk this summer.
Which is a great excuse for us to get back to the episode, as we see Natalie getting introduced now to the girls' cabin, the one that she will be staying in. Sure hope this one goes better, though my initial fear is that it won't.
She is trans, so everybody just fucking be cool.
Now, while I might personally enjoy the line, "she is trans, so everybody be fucking cool," I don't particularly enjoy the way that the camp counselor lady took it upon herself to divulge that information. It is generally the job of the trans person involved to pick when and how soon they are comfortable sharing such personal stuff, if at all or ever. Some people don't want anyone to know at any point that they're trans, and that's their right as a human who gets to exist and have a private life. I'm saying this for all the people with trans friends or people in their own lives out there who are watching this. Don't take the initiative on sharing that with others. You don't get to do that. Get the okay from your trans friends or people in your lives first, then do it. The girls are immediately a hell of a lot more supportive than the guys, though they do show that support in a rather oblique and somewhat painfully queer way, kinda like the try-hard allies that seem to think that what every trans person needs is affirmation to the degree that it becomes overpowering, when maybe sometimes it's just cool to accept them as a person and not make a big deal about it.
Yes, queen! Go off, girl boss! Pussy hat slay!
Oh,
So many times, what I'm getting at in these analyses is that the trans person should be the driving force behind their transition, and how others interact with it. That trans person should have a modicum of control over the way that it gets celebrated or put out into the world, and so cis people and other trans people should step back and respect that. We learn here in this scene that Jessie is a bit cold towards Natalie, not because she's trans, but because Natalie last summer camp called her firecrotch and got the whole camp to pretty much bully her, which is a perfectly fine reason to not be friendly with somebody else. Like, just because they're trans doesn't mean you have to like her. It just means you have to afford her the basic level of respect, which Jessie does by using her pronouns and name right.
I hate Natalie because last summer she called me firecrotch and the whole camp made fun of my burning bush.
Now, unfortunately, the level of acceptance that Natalie received from the girls' cabin immediately begins to drop off when she doesn't talk like the expected level of femininity that the girls want from her, when she uses terminology and language that they see as being masculine coded, all of which ties into that big, whole nebulous idea of the gender binary, and how we force everything into it in some way, and then mock or attack people for not properly aligning with it.
What are you saying? Don't talk like that.
Oh, sorry. I apologize.
Now that sounds like a girl.
I mean, you could say it's somewhat positive because Natalie is dealing with the same level of hazing that a cis girl would deal with from these bitches who want to crush other women down to fit the same box as them, But it's also still shitty because this is an area where trans women will allow that enforcement to happen just so they can keep being treated as the gender they identify as. I'm not sure how nuanced Big Mouth is going to get with this discussion, but they have set themselves up with a lot of problems and nasty things coming Natalie's way, so I am at least expecting them to do some resolution of her identity and how it interacts with these various groups that impinge upon her in their own painful asshole ways. Natalie freaks out at the girls when they start dressing her up in their minds, as they force her into various stereotypes of what they want a trans woman to be, a sign of progressiveness being taken to places that are not actually progressive, but are regressive in how they enforce a cultural monolith on trans people to squash them into a mold that they might not connect with at all. And in response to this, the other girls then do the bullying move of accusing Natalie of dressing too much like a boy and not wanting to pass as a girl, which only serves to upset her more and force her to withdraw into herself and just let this gender bullying happen to her.
Just agree with them now and then think about this for the rest of your life.
I mean, that's exactly the kind of thing that I talked about and worried about. So it's good that Big Mouth is addressing this and talking about it and showing it. I mean, it's good if they resolve this in a positive way at some point, but I at least appreciate that we're doing some sort of setup about the trans character. There's a quick break in the trans action so that we can get to enjoy more stories of boys engaging in sexual harassment, this time sexual harassment of their own family members, by sending them dick pics, which I don't think that's funny.
I also sent my cousin a dick pic.
Technically, it was my aunt.
Maybe my humour is just not at the American level. You know, this could be a cultural thing. Sound off in the comments if you in the US get a kick out of the idea of sending nudes to your family. I mean, I wouldn't want to admit to finding that hilarious, but I'd love to see someone try and defend this. Thankfully, we get moved on from that to seeing Jesse overhear Natalie talk to the camp counselor about wanting to go home, presumably because of all the horrific and tragically traumatic ways that she has interacted with both the girls and the boys' cabins on this camp so far. To which Jesse's hormone monster tells her to go and make friends with Natalie, despite the bullying that she received from her last year. And if the episode is going to go in the direction that I think it might be, then we are in luck, because a main character bonding with the trans character and them sharing time together as girl space friends is a good way to get us some more experiences with the trans person and grow to understand and sympathize with her more as a person.
Tried being strong and it did not work.
That girl needs a friend.
On another break from the transaction, we get the first joke from Big Mouth that I enjoyed. When some kids are building a pool and this big ass pit bull in the background has a moment around it.
Pool! I can't help but think I'll be the one maintaining the pool.
What can I say? I just like somber animals speaking in human voices. If a show was built from just that, it could very well be my favourite show. Jessie interrupts Natalie mid-packing her bags, and we get a bit of backstory here from Natalie as Jessie asks her questions about herself. You know, like a good person, rather than trying to force her into a box or demanding that she reveal personal biological details. We learn that Natalie used to love camp, used to love being part of the prank experiences and hanging out with other people, but when she started going through puberty, her own hormone monster showed up and started telling her all the masculine and male things that was going to happen to her, which made her freak out, an experience that led her to first think that she was gay, before she then realised that that wasn't it either.
Gay, totally gay. And and I realized that didn't feel right either.
We see in flashbacks her fighting with her hormone monster, and we learn that she discovered her identity thanks to a forum for trans kids, all of which gave her the information and the desire to come out as she truly was. Her parents reacted to it poorly initially, before coming around to it with time and with exposure to Lady Gaga specifically, and so Natalie went on to hormone blockers, which literally put up a force field keeping her hormone monster out from fucking with her body more.
Toe hair, fuck you! I was gonna make you such a man.
Now, before we continue the scene, I want to briefly stop here and just go over how Big Mouth decided to showcase this trans backstory. So, there are two things they did here which are interesting, and which stand out as important to see as good. The first is the more simple, and that is specifically how we see hormone blockers being mentioned as a normal part of a kid's transition that Natalie got so that she could stop the hormone monster from attacking her further with stuff that she didn't want. An idea that goes a long way towards normalizing something which should be normalized, especially considering how up in arms certain groups of transphobes and anti-trans... I don't want to say activists, because that feels like too nice of a word for them. Anti-trans shitheads. Yeah, let's go with that. I'm not like doing a presentation at college or anything. This is a fucking stupid YouTube video on a stupid YouTube channel. I can say whatever the hell I want, really. Well, those groups like to hyperbolize the idea that kids accessing hormone blockers is some evil, terrible thing that destroys their bodies and cripples them for life, when in reality, all it does is delay the process of puberty for a period of time until they are comfortable making the decision about whether they wish to go on to HRT or allow their hormones to proceed as normal. This is somehow only dangerous when trans kids do it, because there are a few times when we allow cis kids to use hormone blockers without any real hassle or political interference in that medically safe decision, so it's hard not to see this as just a case of the lives of trans kids being under far more scrutiny than other groups.
I know it won't feel like it based on the decisions I'm taking today, but I really do care about this.
But yeah, cost of all that shit, anything that does even a little bit of normalization of this goes a long way in the current climate towards getting cis people to accept it, and maybe just move away a little bit from the extremist groups wanting to attack trans people in every possible fucking way. The second thing, which ties into that same idea of presenting the lives of trans kids in a real and important to be expressed manner, is how Natalie discusses the fact that she discovered her trans identity specifically through the aid of online forums, which connected with how she felt in ways that allowed her to then realize that was who she was.
But then I found this forum for trans kids and it was like, that's who I am.
Now, this is a useful thing to have illustrated here because it first normalizes the idea that kids going online and seeing information about identities is a good way for them to discover stuff about themselves, something which Big Mouth positions as being okay and not a thing to be concerned about, as well as being one of the few cases that I have ever seen where a show acknowledged the fact that a lot of trans people have to rely upon the internet to find a sense of community, that they might not have ready access to trans people in their physical lives who can give words and light to how they are feeling, or characters that they've seen on shows who are able to give them that push towards having terminology for what they see themselves as. I mean, look, even if trans people do have all that, being able to find forums where they can chat with other people their own age and see what struggles they go through with and communicate that along to each other does go a long way towards allowing them to overcome difficulties and gain tools by which to safely and happily come to terms with who they are and come out. I'm saying that these forums are a good thing, and they so rarely get any recognition of their important place in the development of especially the current modern queer community. A lot of queer people have found themselves through online exposure and connection to others, and with that knowledge have then been able to find others within their IRL lives and to help others as well. It's another plus, is what I'm driving at here, and a plus that I can't honestly say I've seen before, at least not frequently enough that its appearance here doesn't stand out to me as somewhat unique.
I was vibrating at this weird frequency all the time.
Hey, I get it.
The scene continues with Jessie telling Natalie that she doesn't want Natalie to leave, because all those other girls do suck and are bullies, and if Natalie goes, then Jessie will be stuck dealing with them alone. So that's a nice bit of bonding over their shared outsider status within that very limited world of the camp. And as part of their bonding together, Jessie and Natalie then commit to doing what Natalie was famous for doing at camp, I guess, which is playing pranks. The pranks being here, cups full of shit that they hide in the boys' cabin to, I guess, stink the place out.
The first cup of shit will hide someplace where the boys can easily find it.
I'm listening.
I feel like people keep doing pranks in Big Mouth that are just not okay. They always seem to involve genitalia or bodily fluids in a very aggressive manner. I guess this is what Big Mouth thinks kids are all like, or thinks adults will think kids are all like.
Do you want a duck egg?
Oh shit, you got him with the duck egg. He looked at her nut.
Though I've got to say, I never did anything like this with any of my friends, so maybe it's another American style thing. Sound off in the comments again if you're from the US of A and you left cups of shit in people's houses or showed them your genitals when they didn't want to see them as a joke of some kind. I mean, the girls seem to be having a lot of fun with what they're doing, and honestly, everyone else seems to be all over the place with engaging in frankly antisocial behaviours like this, so I will give all of it a big, huge pass, as it just being nice to see girls, a cis girl and trans girl, doing something gross together without it impinging upon their femininity. Yay!
You're amazing, but can I just get some credit for shitting in a cup?
And that's that episode. But remember, we're not done quite yet, because the character of Natalie remained at the camp on the insistence of Jessie, and now they are friends with each other, so we get a bit more time with her before she has to shuffle off out of this show. I'll reserve my overall judgment until we get to the end of her arc, so that we can definitively get the final statement on how I feel about Big Mouth's trans representation, but let's just say that for where it currently stands, I'm pretty happy with it. I think the major flaws are flaws that I have more with Big Mouth's way of doing things rather than with the trans character specifically, and so that's pretty good in the grand scheme of all things.
Silk bustier, mega hot braid.
No, stop it!
With that quickly said, let's move on to Season 4's Episode 2, the hugest period ever. Now, at this point, we're seeing Natalie primarily through her interactions with and her existence as a friend of Jessie's, and so she plays a role of being around when Jessie gets a... well, I mean, the title sort of spoiled the premise a little bit, I guess. Jessie gets a big-ass period that is way heavier and has a lot more visceral elements in it than the regular periods that she has presumably grown more used to by this point. Now, because this episode doesn't really have a trans focus to it with regards to the plot lines or narratives, we're gonna be mostly just sort of skipping through to see if we can find anything that adds moments to our larger case about the way that Big Mouth engages with Natalie, or that has her interact with things occurring, such as that period.
Wow, I'm sorry. That's very visceral.
Yeah, it fucking is.
For the most part, so far, it just seems to be her expressing condolences with Jessie, and also telling a camp guy to go fuck himself because her mum wrote a letter which says she doesn't have to swim. The not swimming thing probably being in some way connected to how she feels about her own current body and the rather exposure-y nature of swimwear. Trust me, you can tuck if you want to, but when you hit those incredibly tiny swimming panties, tucking gets a whole of a lot more tricky to pull off successfully. So I understand the reticence to engage in an activity which feels designed to exaggerate features that cause you dysphoria, and that you don't want a hyper lens focused on.
I don't have to do swimming, you bald fuck. Sorry.
Regardless, it is nice to see that Big Mouth has done another thing that I do feel like needs to be important, which is that they established Natalie as being transgender, and then they allowed her to just be another regular girl on the cast for this episode. It's part of the grander need for normalization, when we do need the definitiveness of having a trans character be known as transgender, so that the community isn't stuck fighting people who seem to do their absolute fucking best to refuse to acknowledge our more tacit representations and existences. But after that has been established, it's good to just let us exist without needing to transform our every appearance into a trans issue episode. Anyway, this episode sees Natalie involved further in helping Jessie search for a tampon in the girl's cabin, just being a supporting character who is supporting her as her friend. And that's sort of it.
Guess for some strange reason I don't want everyone picturing blood gushing out of my goosh.
That's fair.
Yeah, I know, this isn't one with a huge amount to talk about specifically, but that's okay, because as I mentioned earlier, it cannot and should not always be putting the trans character in the main spotlight. Now, this brings us more swiftly to our next episode, the last episode of the Camp Arc trilogy, and the one in which Natalie gets a more dominant role thanks to the fact that she gets involved with a guy at camp, and we get to learn a bunch about the horrors of dating while being both a teenager and also being transgender. Which really does add a bunch of extra anxiety on top of a period of time when anxiety and stress are at an all-time high. No wonder a lot of trauma gets developed in those years, am I right? Anyways, let's hustle on over to Season 4's Episode 3, Poop Madness. Jesus Christ, those titles are very graphic, like a lot of the jokes in the show.
Shower after I made sick on your chest?
And after I pissed blood on you?
Now, this episode is set around the last night of the camp. The night when it's most ideal, I guess, for a lot of the kids to do some teenage hookups, because you probably won't ever have to see them again, and so therefore the investment level to enjoyment level is very, very low. It's like 3 AM at the skeeziest club in town. The club that will inevitably be shutting down its doors for the last time very, very soon because it barely ever seems to make money and nobody ever goes there except for that last minute desperate hookup energy. Sorry, that transformed very quickly into me reliving personal experiences that I assume not everybody necessarily connects with. Sound off in the comments if you... Okay, have I done that joke to death yet? I think I have. Regardless, Natalie is hanging out with Jessie and talking about this horned up attitude towards the final night, until one of the dudes from the camp comes up to them and asks Natalie about a bunch of random weird shit in the woods that clearly seems like his best attempt at impressing her or flirting with her.
Did you hear about the dead bird in the woods? It's been swelling up.
I don't know if dead birds ready to burst or red loogies are gonna do it, but Natalie seems kinda interested, so I guess the lesson of find a person who matches your level of freak remains one of the best advices you can give to anybody looking at dating. Now, it is a little strange when I think about the fact that this was one of the dudes asking incredibly shitty questions and making a problem out of Natalie's transness like 2 episodes ago. But that has been like 4 weeks in universe, and so I don't know, maybe things have changed in the background since then. We didn't get to see it, I mean we haven't really seen Natalie getting harassed beyond that initial introduction, so maybe after everyone simmered down she just kinda became part of the regular camp life and people didn't make a big deal about her transness.
I'm sure you're all totally comfortable with this, right?
I mean, I can hope that was what happened. I Guess we'll find out more about those attitudes though, as Jessie leans in and gives Natalie some advice about how this dude is clearly into her and clearly trying to hit on her, as Natalie is herself pretty clearly kinda interested in him as well, based on body language and whatnot.
Maybe later. I kind of wanted to throw a battery in the bonfire to see what happened.
We see a bit of that anxiety that I mentioned earlier, as Natalie is scared about going over and doing stuff with this dude, because it will be the first time she's kissed a boy in her entire life. And Jessie reminds her that this is the last night of camp, so if anything goes terribly wrong, then you don't have to live in the nightmare aftermath of that for too long, so you know what? Why not live a little? Why not risk it for the chocolate biscuit, as my very, very white and very English parents always used to say. Still do say, I guess. To be clear, my parents aren't dead. They're very much alive and are still saying very white things. The awkward teenage interactions continue until eventually the guy and Natalie make out over the dead bird. And hooray! Good for her, I guess. This seems like a wonderful part of being a kid and the growing up process, and I'm happy for Natalie that she got to experience it as a trans person.
Thank you for doing what's about to happen.
I won't say that she got to experience it without any issues or without any nightmarish shit related to her identity, because we still have half this episode left to go, and so there are plenty of opportunities for Natalie to deal with some bullshit backlash from the boys around who she is. All I hope is that if Big Mouth does go that route, that they at least make it clear that Natalie is not in the wrong for just existing as a trans person, and that the dude who made out with her, fully knowing that fact, and then made a big problem out of it, is the asshole who we should all not like. And we hit that shit show pretty quickly, as Natalie invites the guy back to the group and to keep making out, only for him to be super awkward about that idea and clearly not happy with other people seeing him make out with a trans woman.
I don't know if we should show up at the same time, because then, everyone will know.
And there it is. The big, bubbling pile of transphobia that lies at the heart of a lot of insecure masculinity, which sees the very idea of being attracted to a trans person as something to be ashamed of, and which implicates you in some way with all the horrible negative stereotypes that have been associated with us over the decades. That connects along the way to homophobia too, because the people involved worry that other people are going to see them being with a trans woman as basically just them being with a guy. And so that makes them gay, and being gay is bad.
Terrified of what the guys will say, because you're...
I'm what?
Yeah, it's a fucking shit show, alright? And I can guarantee you that almost every trans woman has, or potentially will in some small way, deal with the collation of all that crap getting spewed out of the mouth of a dude acting as the vocalization of that huge systemic hatred of trans people and trans bodies. What it leads to here is that Natalie feels as if she is being kept secret by this guy, and the shame of being this thing that somebody can like but not want people to know that they like. For the guy, it causes him to very quickly lose Natalie, because we have seen her be someone who doesn't take shit from people, and that she gets very upset quickly when people engage with her transness in a negative way, something that she is clearly pretty sensitive over in an understandable manner.
I'm a person, not something to hide. This is such a fucking bummer.
The show makes it very clear here that the guy is the one in the wrong, that Natalie has plenty of valid reasons to be mad at this, and he even gets some immediate karma as that dead bird explodes all over his face as Natalie walks away from him, telling him to go fuck himself.
French Canadian cunt.
It's high-end meat! Ow! Fuck!
All of which I'm pretty glad they did, because it would have been far sadder to see Natalie accept this situation due to feeling ashamed of herself being trans, and I like the fact that she stands up for herself and doesn't take shit from people over her identity. A shitty, terrible thing happened, but the show used this as a way of connecting with an issue that trans kids and adults can face, and gave us her side of it, and had us see the trans person not just allow herself to be used like that. Back at the campfire, Natalie and Jesse talk over what happened, with Jesse getting mad at the dude and calling him what he is, which is transphobic.
Ugh, that transphobic cargo short wearing Canadian
He is dealing with and expressing transphobia. And so, yeah, it's appropriate that we label it correctly when it comes up. They talk about going back to kick his ass, despite the fact that neither one has really done fighting or anything like that, so it would probably go poorly. But Natalie doesn't want to spend her last few hours at camp doing something like that. Instead, she wants to be grateful for the fact that she made a really cool friend and got her first kiss despite how it ended up turning out.
At least you got your first kiss.
Yeah, and I made a really special friend this summer.
And that's the message that the show wants to go out on. Not focusing on the potentially traumatic and nasty experience that Natalie had with some random asshole dude, but on how she grew close to Jesse, and how they became great friends over this camp, and they bonded with each other. We even get to see the dude dealing with his remorse as the two girls share their feelings of friendship, talking about how he ruined his life by being too scared of what other people think, and so missed out on spending more time with the girl who was the best kiss of his life.
Don't fuck it up, because you're afraid of what other people might say, even if it was the best.
And that's where our story ends. So, what's the takeaway here? What's the up and up on how Big Mouth handled its trans representation? Well, we already covered a fair few details on the trip to this conclusion, including the choice to have a trans actor do the voice acting for the trans character, which is a pretty big thumbs up. When we also look at the fact that Big Mouth consistently had Natalie engaging with trans stuff in a way that didn't demonize it or her, and also allowed her to express things that connected with the real lives of trans kids and not just the stereotypes that other shows have built and relied upon, as well as the fact that it gave Natalie the ability to also exist in narratives without having to bring up her trans identity because it wasn't relevant to her role as being a friend of Jesse's.
I'm gonna miss you so much.
You have to come see me in the city, okay?
I'm gonna text you every day.
I think the conclusion ends up being one that this is a positive piece of representation. That despite my own personal reticence towards the show and its form of comedy, I have to conclude did do a good job of putting us into their world without changing that world too much to fit a trans person in, allowing the trans character to just meld into the way that things are done.
Ooh, I think I found some cooter plugs for your ginormous period. Well, you're dating.
That's part and parcel of that normalization that is really the next big step in trans representation and identity on the screen. It's not about educating people on how we are a real thing that totally is out there in the world, but making it clear that we belong in that world, and that we deserve to be able to go around as ourselves without getting singled out for it. So yeah, huge props to Big Mouth. I don't have to love you to appreciate what you did for me and my community. Thank you for giving us a moment in a way that didn't make me feel like shit, and hopefully went some way towards getting cis audiences more on board with our existence, especially as trans kids, a topic of much disrepute and misinformation right now in the very politicized partisan world that seems to have been constructed around the trans community.
Ahead of the 2024 election, capitalizing on a broader culture war over LGBTQ rights.
With all of that said, I hope you enjoyed this video, had a good time, or just found me to be acceptable background noise while you did stuff. If any of that was true, a great way to show your appreciation is by going to my Patreon or Ko-Fi and subscribing or giving money there. The names of those in the $5 and up category should be scrolling past the screen right now, and I appreciate everyone on there for helping to fund what I am doing here. helping to keep this channel going as I do my best to slowly and persistently talk about all trans representation or trans adjacent representation that exists, in the hopes of eventually making a giant video down the line where I break down everything good and bad to answer the question of trans representation? Analysing stuff like this is super important for ensuring that creators in the future can do a better job, as it helps them to know what to avoid and know what to build upon, as well as giving us the tools to understand the world around us through the lens of how things are presented on the screen. The TV and film are, after all, mirrors held up to society, reflecting ourselves and our opinions and attitudes and identities. So yeah, that money goes a long way towards keeping this channel running up that hill of discussing trans stuff, paying for things like food, rent, power, internet, and cat management, without which I would find it quite hard to make these videos at all. A huge shout out once again to everybody who does fund the channel, but also thanks to everyone who watched this video too. That does go a long way towards helping me want to keep making things. And if you want to check out more videos, that also goes a long way towards telling YouTube that my videos are worth watching, and to keep putting them in the algorithm. With all of that said, make sure you stay frosty, and have a great, great day.